All good things have to come to an end, and mentoring is no exception. So in this session we'll be looking at ending and reviewing the mentoring relationship. By the end of this session, our objectives are that you'll be able to summarise the reasons that a mentoring relationship may end, identify the factors to consider in ending the relationship, and assess effective ways of reviewing the relationship. What reasons can you think of for ending a mentoring relationship? Write down your answers. Here are some answers that you may have considered. First of all, the mentoring would have been set up with some objectives in mind, and when those objectives have been met, then it's time to finish. So perhaps the purpose of the mentoring was to introduce the client to the organisation and the client's role in it. After a period of time, that will have been achieved, and the client will feel part of the organisation and team and settled into their role. A second reason is that sometimes, because of change of leadership or financial implications, organisations decide to stop mentoring programs. In this case, the mentor and the client will want to discuss if they want the relationship to continue, and if so, how this can be arranged despite the changing circumstances. I've had this happen where a government-funded programme had its funding withdrawn, and some clients chose to continue with the mentoring and pay for it themselves. A third reason is either the mentor or the client may be moving location. Once again, there would want to be a discussion about if there is a wish for the relationship to continue or not, and how it would work. I've known this happen where the client and the mentor have decided to continue using phone and e-mentoring. A fourth reason is that sometimes the relationship ends because it's just run out of steam. This is usually because of a lack of commitment on one side or the other, or both. In this case, it's important there is honest recognition of what is happening. A fifth reason is that in some cases the relationship ends because, for whatever reason, it's not proved productive. In this case, it's important for both parties to review so that they can learn and move on. And finally, sometimes a client will have decided to leave the organisation that's supporting them. For example, they find a different job, or a student doesn't like their work placement, etc. So once again, the mentor and the client may like to have a discussion about whether they want the mentoring relationship to continue in a different form. Clutterbuck and Megginson, in their study, identified two categories for the ending of mentoring relationships. The first category was where there was a clear ending, and in these they found that most of the time there was a review and a celebration of what they had achieved, and the experience was seen as a positive one by both parties, and both moved on with confidence from the experience. The second category was ones where the relationship just drifted away, and in this case they found that both parties felt unsure of their contribution, and in some cases they felt betrayed and that the experience was viewed as negative. So let's go on to think about ending the relationship. This list is a combination of my own experience and from literature on the subject. The first thing is about planning for the ending in advance. That at the beginning of the relationship you have a clearly defined aims and objectives and put a timescale on it. And discuss in advance how you will know if the relationship is working or not, and what will happen in either circumstance. Then you'll want to review the objectives and how many of those have been met, how the objectives may have changed over the course of the mentoring, which objectives were set but not met, and what is the learning from that. It could be that as time has gone on, they were no longer relevant, or that they were not useful goals in the first place, or that the time frame was not realistic, or that the client has not been able to achieve them for some reason. Much learning can come from this review on both sides. It's important to acknowledge and celebrate the achievements, and you may want to think about what would be the best way of doing that. It's also important not only to review the objectives, but all the learning. That means the learning in terms of content, what the client has learned about how to handle situations and progress, and what you as a mentor has learned from the client in these matters. It also means learning in terms of how to conduct an effective mentoring relationship. This is useful for both parties too, and particularly for the client if, as is common, they then become a mentor. It is then useful to review with the client about their ongoing development needs and objectives and how they're going to get those met. Sometimes they may want to have a mentor with different expertise for the next phase of their development, or they may want to do something totally different. But it ensures that the client realizes that development is ongoing and that they have planned for it. And the last part is to agree on how the next phase of your relationship will be. Will you still want to support on a more casual basis? Or would you like to break the relationship entirely? Or what does the client want for the future? Here again, it's important for everyone to be very honest and open. I'm still in touch with many clients that I've mentored and still enjoy that connection. So as a mentor, it's well worth thinking carefully about this phase of the relationship. This exercise will help you consider how you'll approach ending the relationship. Firstly, how would you recognise if the relationship was not working well, and when would you decide that it was time to end the relationship? Secondly, how would you approach ending a mentoring relationship where you felt the client was not engaged or committed to the process? Thirdly, what feedback would you want to help your learning and growth as a mentor? And lastly, assess and evaluate different ways of reviewing the mentoring. Who would need to be involved and for what reasons?